She thought she was escaping a nightmare, but what if the worst was yet to come? A key that unlocks more than just doors. A dark force that refuses to let go. As secrets unfold and choices are made, one question remains. Can she survive the darkness she's unleashed? Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't be able to look away from. The day had been long. I could feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at my limbs as I entered the house. I barely had the energy to take off my shoes. I went straight to the bedroom, collapsing onto the bed. The soft sheets felt like a warm embrace. I closed my eyes, welcoming the darkness. But sleep didn't come quickly. My mind raced, replaying the events of the day. After a while, my body finally gave in, and I drifted off into a deep slumber. The room was still. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Hours passed, and I was suddenly awake. I didn't know what woke me, but I knew something wasn't right. The air in the room felt heavier. I heard muffled voices. It was coming from the living room. I froze. One of the voices sounded familiar. It was my husband's voice. But there was something strange in the tone. I listened more carefully, trying to make out the words. They were speaking softly, as if they didn't want to be heard. But I could hear the anger in their voices. I crept closer to the door, trying not to make a sound. The voices became clearer. My husband was speaking to his brother. "I can't believe she's so clueless," his brother said. "She trusts us completely," my husband replied. My heart started to race. I pressed my ear against the door. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I didn't know if I should stay or go back to bed. But I had to know what they were talking about. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," my husband continued. "She's so trusting. It's almost too easy." His brother laughed quietly. "You've been playing this game for years. She never suspects a thing." There was a long pause. Then, my husband said something that made my blood run cold. "She'll never find out. We just need to keep her in the dark." I felt like I had been slapped. I staggered back, heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to rush in and confront them, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approaching the door sent me into a panic. I quickly backed away, hiding behind the curtain. The door creaked open. I held my breath. My husband walked past, his face unreadable. He didn't even glance at the bedroom door. My body was trembling. I stayed frozen, waiting for the footsteps to fade. Then, the door clicked shut. I slowly exhaled, my mind reeling from what I had just overheard. It wasn't just a conversation. It was a betrayal. I felt sick to my stomach. How long had this been going on? What exactly were they planning? I couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker was unfolding behind closed doors. I didn't know what to do next. But I couldn't just ignore it. I had to find out the truth. The silence in the house felt deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made me jump. I wanted to confront my husband. I wanted to scream at him. But the words stuck in my throat. I lay back on the bed, my mind spinning. The room felt suffocating. I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm inside me. But I couldn't. I knew I would never be able to sleep peacefully again. Not until I knew what they were planning. The night dragged on in silence, but the storm inside me only grew stronger. My mind raced as I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between my heartbeats. What were they planning? What had I missed? I kept replaying the conversation over and over again in my head, unable to make sense of it. The room felt colder now, as if the shadows themselves were closing in on me. Every little sound sent a jolt through my body. Footsteps outside, the rustling of the trees, even the distant hum of the refrigerator. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I needed to know what was happening, but my body felt frozen, paralyzed by fear. My husband was downstairs, and I had no idea what he was up to. What if this was something bigger than just his brother? The idea that my own family might be involved made my blood run cold. Was it possible they were all in on it? The thought seemed impossible, yet the pieces were starting to fall into place. I had to act quickly. I slowly sat up, careful not to make any noise. The soft moonlight that filtered in from the window cast an eerie glow on the room. I glanced at the door. My husband had left, but the danger still loomed. I needed to gather information. I slipped out of bed, moving as silently as I could. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and my heart skipped a beat. I froze for a moment, waiting for any sign that my movements had been detected. Nothing. I breathed a little easier, but the tension remained. I tiptoed to the hallway, my bare feet making no sound on the cool floor. The living room was just ahead, and I could hear muffled voices. They weren't speaking anymore, but the faint sound of movement reached my ears. What were they doing? I needed to get closer. I carefully crept down the hallway, trying to stay in the shadows. Each step felt like it took a year. As I rounded the corner, I saw them. My husband and his brother were standing near the window, speaking in low voices. I could barely make out the words, but I heard enough to confirm my worst fear. "It's almost time," my husband said, his voice low and calculated. "Are you sure?" his brother asked. "Absolutely. She'll never see it coming." A chill ran down my spine. I had no idea what they were planning, but it was clear they were preparing for something big. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to confront them, but I couldn't reveal that I was already onto them. I had to be clever, calculated. I waited in the dark, listening to every word they said. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the air thick with the weight of their secret. After what felt like an eternity, they finally fell silent. I knew they weren't done yet, but it was clear that they were on the edge of a decision. My heart hammered in my chest. I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to make my move. Without thinking, I stepped forward, my hand brushing the corner of the wall. The sound echoed like a thunderclap in the silence. I froze. They both turned around, their eyes wide with surprise. I had been caught. My husband's face morphed into something unrecognizable, anger, confusion, and then, something darker. "You," he spat, his voice thick with fury. "How long have you been listening?" I couldn't respond. All the words I had rehearsed in my mind had escaped me. I stood there, paralyzed by his gaze. His brother stepped forward, his expression hard. "We knew you'd find out eventually." "Find out?" I whispered, finally regaining my voice. "What is this? What's going on?" My husband's face darkened. "You should never have gotten involved. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me if it involves my own family," I shouted before I could stop myself. His eyes narrowed. "You don't understand. This is bigger than you think. You wouldn't want to be part of it." I shook my head. "I don't care how big it is. If it's wrong, I'll stop it." "You can't," he replied coldly. "This is already in motion." Before I could respond, his brother stepped between us, blocking my view of him. "It's done. There's no turning back now." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean by that? What have you done?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gave me a look of pity, or perhaps it was something else I couldn't place. "You won't believe it until it's too late," he said softly. I stepped back, my mind racing. "What are you talking about? Just tell me." My husband stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You'll find out soon enough. But you don't need to know now. You can't do this," I cried, desperate for answers. His eyes glinted. "Watch me." The room seemed to shrink as the weight of their words pressed down on me. They were hiding something terrible, and I had no idea how deep it went. I needed to know what they were planning. I needed to expose them. But how? I couldn't just leave it here. The truth was slipping away, and I couldn't let it. Before I could say another word, my husband turned and walked away, his brother following closely behind him. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, my mind a swirl of confusion and fear. What had I just heard? What had they meant by all of this? I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't let them get away with whatever they were planning. As I stood there, struggling to catch my breath, a single thought echoed in my mind. I had to act fast. But how? My mind felt like a storm of questions, each one louder than the last. What were they planning? Why was my husband involved? Why had his brother spoken of something too late and already in motion? The cold tiles under my feet sent a shiver up my spine as I stood there. I could hear the faint sound of a car engine starting outside. Through the window, I saw the dim glow of headlights sweep across the wall. They were leaving. My heart raced. Where were they going at this hour? I darted back into the bedroom before they could see me and peeked through the curtain. The car rolled slowly out of the driveway, its red taillights vanishing into the darkness. The house fell silent. An emptiness settled in, heavier than before. I swallowed hard. Now was my chance. If there were answers in this house, I had to find them now. I slipped out of the bedroom and padded into the living room. The faint smell of my husband's cologne lingered in the air. On the coffee table lay a folder, carelessly left behind. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The paper inside was thick, official. I unfolded it. It was a contract, but not a normal one. Across the top in bold letters was the name of a company I had never heard before. Below that were signatures. My husband's name, his brother's name, and my name. But I had never signed it. I stared at the signature. It was a perfect copy of my handwriting. A chill crept over me. They had forged my name. I flipped through the rest of the pages, my heart pounding louder with each one. It was a transfer of assets. Everything in my name, the house, the joint account, even the small savings my parents had left me, all of it was listed. The date on the contract was today. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was their plan. They were stripping me of everything. I clutched the papers, my fingers trembling. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to keep reading. At the bottom was a clause, one I almost missed. If the party named above is incapacitated or deemed unfit to handle finances, control of all assets will pass to the secondary signatories. Incapacitated. Deemed unfit. The words struck me like a blow. They were planning something far worse than just taking my money. I staggered back, clutching the papers to my chest. The house felt colder now, the walls closer. Every shadow looked like a threat. My husband had always been charming, patient, kind, or so I thought. But this was calculated. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a trap. And I was standing right in the middle of it. I forced myself to breathe, trying to steady my racing heart. I couldn't let them come back and find me with this. I stuffed the papers back into the folder and tucked it under the couch cushion, my hands moving on instinct. Then I ran to the bedroom, grabbed my phone, and dialed the only person I could trust, my sister. She answered groggily. "What's wrong?" "It's the middle of the night." "I can't explain right now," I whispered, my voice shaking. "But I think something bad is happening. Can you come get me?" "What? What do you mean? Are you in danger?" "Yes," I breathed. "Please. Just come." "I'll leave right now," she said, her voice now sharp with worry. I hung up, my hands trembling. The clock on the wall ticked louder and louder, like a heartbeat. I didn't know how much time I had before they came back. I began gathering a few essentials, my passport, some cash hidden in a drawer, a small bag of clothes. Each item felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of my life had been packed into it. I kept glancing at the window, expecting headlights to sweep across at any moment. Then I heard something. A creak from the hallway. I froze. My heart thudded painfully. They couldn't be back already. I stepped toward the door, straining to hear. Another creak, closer this time. I tightened my grip on my phone. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. I moved slowly into the hallway, the floor cool under my bare feet. The sound had come from the kitchen. I peeked around the corner. Empty. The refrigerator hummed softly. I exhaled, but my relief was short-lived. Behind me, the front door clicked. I spun around. The door was ajar. Someone had opened it. I stepped back, my pulse roaring in my ears. A shadow fell across the entryway. A tall figure stepped inside, moving slowly, deliberately. It wasn't my sister. And it wasn't my husband. The figure closed the door behind him and locked it with a quiet snap. He turned his head toward me. I could see only the outline of his face in the dim light. A stranger. Who are you? I demanded, my voice trembling. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow step forward. My back hit the wall. I glanced toward the kitchen, toward the back door. Blocked. He spoke at last, his voice low and steady. You weren't supposed to know yet. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? What are you doing in my house? He tilted his head, as though studying me. They told me you'd be asleep. I gripped my phone tighter. Get out. I'm calling the police. He smiled faintly. Go ahead. There was something in his eyes. Not anger, not malice, but something colder. Professional. Like he was here for a job. I took a step sideways, edging toward the kitchen. He mirrored me. Stay where you are, he said quietly. My heart pounded. What do you want? He didn't blink. I'm here to make sure everything goes smoothly. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? He didn't answer. I bolted. I darted into the kitchen, my bare feet sliding on the tile. Behind me, I heard his footsteps, steady, unhurried. I grabbed a knife from the counter and turned to face him. He stopped just inside the doorway, his eyes on the blade. Put that down, he said softly. Stay away from me, I hissed, my hands shaking. He took one more step forward. I raised the knife higher. The house felt like it was holding its breath. And then, the man took one more step forward. I raised the knife higher, trying to steady my trembling hands. His eyes didn't leave mine, and he seemed almost amused. It was the kind of look that made my skin crawl. He didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of fear. He was confident, too confident. Put it down, he repeated, his voice so calm that it only made me more nervous. Stay away from me, I shouted, trying to sound stronger than I felt. But the fear was crawling up my throat, choking me. What did he want? Why was he here? His gaze flicked to the knife, then back to me. I don't want to hurt you, he said, his voice almost too soothing. I didn't believe him. How could I? The way he stood there, so collected, made me feel like I was nothing more than a pawn in some twisted game. Why are you here? I asked, my voice quieter now. He tilted his head, considering my question for a moment. Because they sent me, he finally answered. They? Who's they? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took another step closer, his body language still so calm, so calculated. I took a step back, my mind racing. I needed to think. I needed to get out of here. But the door was behind him. The back exit was too far. I was trapped. You're making this difficult, he said, almost as though he was talking to a child. His calm demeanor was infuriating. It only made me more desperate. I gripped the knife harder. You're not going to stop me, I spat. He raised his eyebrows slightly, like he was entertained by my defiance. I'm not here to hurt you, he repeated, but this time there was something different in his tone. It was a threat. I lunged forward, the knife aimed directly at him. But he was quicker. He caught my wrist with ease, stopping the blade just inches from his chest. For a brief moment, I was frozen, my arm held in an iron grip. His fingers were cold, but his strength was terrifying. You really don't know when to stop, do you? He murmured, twisting my wrist with a slight pressure. Pain shot through my arm, and I gasped. I won't let you hurt me, I gritted out. He chuckled softly, a low, almost bored sound. Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to come with me. My heart hammered in my chest. Come with you. Where? You'll find out soon enough. He gave my wrist a sharp twist, and the knife dropped from my hand, clattering to the floor. Before I could react, he was already behind me, one arm around my waist, pulling me towards the door. Let go of me, I screamed, kicking and thrashing. But he was too strong. His grip tightened, and I could barely breathe. I felt the weight of his arm against my body, forcing me forward with each step. Stop fighting, he said, his voice no longer soothing but almost disappointed. I refused to stop. I fought harder, trying to break free, but his hold was unyielding. The front door creaked open, and the cold night air hit me like a slap. He dragged me outside, and I saw the car parked on the driveway, the same car that had pulled up earlier. This wasn't good. I looked around for help. But the street was empty. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. I was completely alone. He shoved me into the back seat of the car. The moment I was inside, he slammed the door shut, locking it from the outside. I banged on the window, my panic rising. "Let me out! Let me out!" But he didn't respond. Instead, he walked around to the driver's side, slid in, and started the engine. The car rumbled to life, and we began driving away from my house. I could feel the walls of the car closing in around me. I couldn't breathe. I needed to escape. But I had no idea where I was going or who this man was. I turned to face him, my mind still reeling from everything that had just happened. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaky. He didn't look at me. Instead, he focused on the road ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel with an eerie calmness. "It's not what I want," he said, his voice flat. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Orders," he replied simply. "From who?" I pressed. His lips curled into a small smile, but his eyes remained cold. "I'm just the messenger." I stared at him, trying to make sense of the situation. Who was behind this? Why did they want me? I thought of the contract, of my husband and his brother. I had to find a way out. The car took a sharp turn, and I was thrown against the side door. I barely caught myself in time. We were speeding down unfamiliar roads now, the streetlights flashing by in a blur. Where were we going? The car finally slowed, and we came to a stop in front of a large, ominous-looking building. It was surrounded by tall gates, and the windows were dark, like it had been abandoned. My heart pounded in my chest. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You'll see," he replied. He opened the door and stepped out, leaving me no choice but to follow. I was still dazed, my mind struggling to catch up with everything that was happening. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady beneath me. He led me to the front entrance of the building, and the heavy door creaked open as if it hadn't been used in years. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the silence was overwhelming. The walls were lined with old, faded paintings, and the floor was covered in a layer of grime. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice echoing in the empty space. "Where am I?" "This is where it all ends," he replied, his tone colder than ever. I stepped forward, my mind spinning with fear and confusion. Before I could ask anything else, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A tall man with graying hair, dressed in a dark suit. I froze. "Welcome," the man said, his voice deep and commanding. "Come in. You're just in time for the final part of the plan." I looked from him to the stranger who had brought me here. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I had no choice but to follow. But deep inside, something told me that this was just the beginning of the nightmare. A nightmare that I would never escape from. The man stepped aside as the door creaked open wider. I took a tentative step into the room, my breath catching in my throat. The air smelled stale, like old wood and forgotten things. The dim lighting cast long, eerie shadows across the cracked floorboards. I could barely make out the details of the room. Old furniture covered in sheets, dusty chandeliers hanging from the high ceilings. It felt like a place lost in time. The tall man who had spoken earlier turned to face me, his cold gaze boring into mine. "Come in. There's no point in standing in the doorway." His voice was calm, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl. I couldn't move for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I glanced back at the door behind me, but the stranger who had brought me here was already closing it, the sound of the lock clicking shut. I was trapped. "Where am I?" I asked again, my voice shaking more than I'd intended. The man in the dark suit studied me for a long moment, as if deciding whether to answer. When he did speak, it was with chilling precision. "You're in the place where your life as you knew it ends." I stepped back, my mind spinning. I tried to push my panic down, focusing instead on the only question that mattered. "What do you want with me?" The tall man smiled slightly, but it wasn't a kind smile. "We don't want anything from you," he said slowly. "But you have something we need." I felt my stomach twist. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for me to follow him deeper into the room. Reluctantly, I took a step forward, my body stiff with fear. As we moved through the room, I caught glimpses of what looked like old, dusty bookshelves and strange artifacts that I couldn't place. It felt like I had stepped into another world, a world I had no part in, no knowledge of, and certainly no desire to be in. We stopped in front of a large wooden table, and the man gestured for me to sit. I hesitated but finally lowered myself onto the edge of the chair, my hands gripping the armrests tightly. "This is where everything starts," he said, his tone darkening. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead, frozen by fear. "Where's my husband?" I asked, suddenly realizing I hadn't seen him since the car ride. A cold laugh escaped the man. "Your husband? He's the least of your concerns now." The way he said it sent a chill through me. Before I could ask anything else, the stranger, the one who had brought me here, stepped into the room, his eyes narrowing when he saw me sitting at the table. "Is she ready?" he asked the tall man. The tall man didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at me with an unsettling gaze. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. I shook my head, my mouth dry. "No, I don't." "We need you," the man said slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. "We need your cooperation to finish what we've started. The plan can't move forward without you." I felt my heart race. "What plan?" I asked desperately. "What are you talking about? What have you done?" He stepped closer, leaning over the table toward me. "The plan that involves your husband. And your family. You see, everything has been set in motion long before tonight. The contract, the money, it's all part of a larger game." My head was spinning. "Stop," I whispered. "This doesn't make any sense." "Why me?" The tall man stood back up, his hands folding behind his back. "You're part of something much bigger than you think. A part of a larger system, a deal that's been made." My pulse quickened. "Tell me what deal?" I demanded. But he didn't answer. Instead, he turned his back to me, speaking to the stranger. "She's not ready." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly across the floor. "What's going on? Who are you? Who are you working for?" The tall man's face remained unreadable. "I'm sure you'll find out soon enough." Before I could respond, the stranger grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the door. "What's happening?" I cried, my voice desperate. "Where are we going?" The man didn't answer. He shoved me out of the room, into the cold hallway. I stumbled but managed to catch myself. "Please," I pleaded, my voice hoarse. "Please, tell me what's going on. I need to know." The stranger didn't stop walking. He pushed open another door, this one smaller, leading to a dimly lit staircase that descended into the darkness. I felt the chill of the air as I stepped onto the first step, my feet hesitant. "Down there," he said. "You'll find your answers." I had no choice but to follow. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. The staircase creaked under my weight, and the darkness around me seemed to swallow any hope I had left. At the bottom, the air smelled damp, musty. A faint light flickered in the corner, revealing a room that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. And in the center of that room, a single chair. I was pushed forward. "Sit," the stranger ordered. I didn't want to. I wanted to run. But I could already hear the sound of footsteps behind me, the others waiting in the shadows. With no other option, I sat. The chair was cold and uncomfortable, its wooden frame creaking beneath my weight. I was trapped again. The stranger stepped away, and the door slammed shut behind him, leaving me alone in the dark room. Minutes passed. Then the door opened again, but this time, the tall man entered. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, watching me with those cold, calculating eyes. "You're wondering what this is all about," he said at last. "Yes," I whispered. "Please, tell me. What do you want from me?" He moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "You're part of something bigger than you can understand," he said softly. "But I'll explain." I held my breath, waiting for the explanation that I feared would make everything worse. "It all starts with your husband," he began. "He's been working with us for a long time." I blinked. "No. He can't be. He would never." The man held up a hand. "Let me finish. Your husband has been involved in this plan from the start. He just hasn't been as upfront with you as he should have been." I shook my head, disbelief coursing through my veins. "No. You're lying." The tall man's expression softened, just for a second. "I wish I were. But you need to understand the truth." He leaned forward. "Your husband is in deeper than you think. And now, we need you to complete the final step." "What step?" He smiled slowly. "The step that will free you from your bonds, and give you everything you've ever wanted." I frowned. "You're not making any sense." "What do you mean?" "Everything is in place. The final piece is you." I was about to speak when the door behind me opened again. But this time, it wasn't the stranger. It was my husband. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him. My husband, standing in the doorway. His face was unreadable, his eyes colder than I had ever seen them. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The silence was thick, suffocating. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. I couldn't make sense of any of this. "You're here," I finally managed to whisper, but the words felt foreign. It didn't feel real. Not like this. Not like him. He stepped into the room, his footsteps slow but deliberate. His gaze never left mine. And when he spoke, his voice was emotionless. "I'm sorry it had to be this way," he said quietly. I shook my head, unable to process the words. "Sorry? Sorry for what?" I stood up from the chair, my knees shaky beneath me. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" I was pleading now. He looked at me, but there was no hint of warmth in his eyes. It was as though I wasn't the woman he had married. It was like he was a different person entirely. "Everything you've been told is true. But not in the way you think," he said, his voice cold. I felt the ground beneath me start to spin. "Your family, my family, everything. It was all part of a plan." I took a step back, shaking my head. "No," I whispered. "I don't believe you." He sighed, a long, heavy sound. "Believe what you want. The truth is undeniable. It's already happening. And you're a part of it, whether you like it or not." I backed away from him, my heart thumping violently in my chest. "No, no. I don't want this. I never wanted any of this." The tall man, the one who had been guiding me through this nightmare, stepped forward. "We told you," he said, his voice almost pitying. "Your husband has been part of this for years. And now, so are you." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. The tall man smiled faintly, but his eyes were hard. "It means that you're the last piece. The key to unlocking everything." I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. "Key to what?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. My husband stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "I never wanted this life for you," he said, his voice soft but still distant. "You never asked for it. I didn't want to pull you into this, but I had no choice." "Had no choice," I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "Don't tell me this is some kind of twisted excuse. I trusted you. I loved you." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. "I know," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "And I regret what's happened. But you have to understand, I didn't do this to hurt you. This was bigger than us. It always was." My world tilted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about my husband was unraveling before my eyes. "I don't know who you are anymore," I said, my voice breaking. And I meant it. The man standing before me, this cold, emotionless stranger, was not the man I had married. The tall man stepped closer to my husband, his voice low and dangerous. "You need to make her understand," he said, almost like a command. My husband didn't respond right away. Instead, He looked at me, his gaze searching, trying to find the right words. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him how he could have lied to me all this time. But the words stuck in my throat. "You're involved in something much bigger than you know," my husband said finally. "I was recruited into this years ago, long before we ever met. At first, I tried to get out. I thought I could escape. But—" He paused, glancing at the tall man. "I couldn't. And now, neither can you." I shook my head, backing away. "Stop. I don't want to be part of this. Whatever you're involved in, I want no part of it." My husband's eyes softened, just for a second. "I never wanted this for you," he repeated. "But now that you're involved, there's no going back. I'm sorry, but you're in too deep." I backed into the wall, my mind racing. I could feel the walls closing in on me. I could feel the weight of everything that had just been revealed crashing down on me. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The tall man's cold smile returned. "Your cooperation. The deal can't be completed without it." I wasn't sure what they meant by the deal, but I knew I had to stop them. I couldn't let this happen. I had to escape, no matter what it took. I felt my heart racing in my chest. I could feel the heat rising in my veins, the adrenaline kicking in. My hands were shaking, but I clenched my fists. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't let them win. "How do I stop you?" I demanded. "How do I stop this?" The tall man stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with something almost like amusement. "You can't. Not anymore." He reached into his coat and pulled out something small and metallic. It was a device, a key. I watched, my breath catching in my throat, as he placed it on the table between us. "This is what you need to finish the plan," he said. It was so simple. A key. "You have to make the choice," my husband said quietly. I looked at him, my chest tightening. "Choice? What choice?" The tall man leaned forward, his voice cold and firm. "Either you help us complete the final stage, or—" He paused for effect, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "Or we finish it without you. And it won't be pretty." I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no escaping this. No matter what I did, they had me cornered. "You're trapped," the tall man continued. "You have no way out." My mind raced. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let this be my fate. I looked at the device on the table. I knew what it was. It was the key to whatever they were planning. And I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had to act. There was no time left. I reached for the key. My hand trembled as my fingers brushed the cold metal. It was just a key, but it felt like the heaviest thing in the world. For a moment, I hesitated, my mind swirling with 1,000 questions. What would happen if I took it? What would happen if I didn't? But there was no time left for hesitation. The tall man's gaze never wavered. His cold, calculating eyes locked onto mine, his face a mask of indifference. "You don't have much time," he said, his voice low. "You have to make a choice, and you have to make it now." I clenched my jaw. I couldn't think anymore. I was trapped. But I still had a shred of defiance left in me. I wasn't going to let them have the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I would fight, somehow, someway. I took a deep breath and grabbed the key. The tall man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Good," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Now, you understand. You're one of us now." My heart hammered in my chest. "One of you." I almost laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. "I'm not one of you. I'll never be one of you." He didn't answer, instead turning toward my husband. "She's in position," the tall man said. My husband remained silent, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. I didn't know what to make of him anymore. He was a stranger to me, a shadow of the man I had once loved. The tall man turned back to me, his expression becoming serious. "The plan is simple," he said. "You activate the device, and everything will fall into place. The money, the assets, the power, it will all be ours. It will all be yours." I looked at the key in my hand, my heart racing. What exactly am I supposed to do with this? I asked, my voice sharp with desperation. Just tell me what you want, and get this over with. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. You activate the device, and the final stage begins. Everything you've ever wanted will be yours. But remember, once you make that choice, there's no going back. His eyes flickered briefly to my husband. You'll lose yourself in the process. My breath hitched. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the point of no return. The point where everything I knew, everything I had ever believed in, would shatter. I looked down at the key in my palm. It seemed so small, so insignificant, but it held the weight of my entire future in its cold metallic shape. I glanced at my husband again. He was still silent, his face betraying nothing. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I already knew. There were no answers left. There were only choices. Do it, the tall man urged, his voice like a snake's hiss. You know what's at stake. But I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. What had they done to my life? How had everything gotten so out of control? I can't, I whispered, my voice breaking. I won't be a part of this. Not like this. The tall man's eyes narrowed. You don't have a choice. He stepped closer, his breath cold against my skin. You're already part of this plan. You always have been. My stomach twisted in knots. No, I wasn't. I had never asked for this. I didn't want to be part of this twisted, cruel game. But as I stood there, staring down at the key, the realization hit me. They weren't going to stop. This wasn't something I could walk away from. They had already set it all in motion. And if I didn't do it, they would make sure I never left here alive. My pulse raced. The weight of the key in my hand felt unbearable. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drop it, to run, to do anything other than what they wanted me to do. But then my husband stepped forward, his voice almost a whisper. You don't have a choice. We're already too far in. His words sent a chill through me. I couldn't look at him anymore. The man I loved, the man I had trusted, had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even fathom. I felt the tears rise in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. No. I wouldn't let them break me. I took one last long look at the key, then closed my fingers around it, holding it tight. This was it. The moment where everything changed. Do it, the tall man urged again, his voice insistent. You know what you have to do. I couldn't delay any longer. I couldn't keep pretending that things were going to be okay. They weren't. They hadn't been for a long time. I stepped forward, placing the key into the slot on the wall that I hadn't even noticed until now. The wall clicked, and suddenly the room seemed to tremble around me. A low, humming noise filled the air, and I felt a strange energy rush through my veins. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, and I staggered back, trying to keep my balance. The tall man smiled again, this time with something darker behind his eyes. Congratulations, he said. The plan is in motion. You've made the right choice. But I didn't feel right. I felt numb, like I had just stepped off the edge of a cliff, and I was falling, but there was no ground to catch me. The humming grew louder, and I could feel the temperature in the room drop. My breath came out in visible puffs. The walls seemed to be closing in, and everything, felt like it was spiraling out of control. Now, the tall man said, his voice almost a whisper, you'll understand what comes next. I turned to look at my husband, hoping to see something in his face, anything that would give me the answers I so desperately needed. But he was just standing there, his face a mask of indifference. He didn't care. He never cared. The finality of everything hit me all at once. I had been trapped from the start. This was never about love. It was never about family. It had all been part of their plan. A plan I had no say in, no control over. And now, there was no going back. No escape. No way to undo the damage. The humming reached a fever pitch, and the air felt electric, like something was about to explode. But I was already lost. And the worst part? I had always been lost. The humming reached a fever pitch. I could feel the air thick with something heavy, as though the very fabric of reality was bending around me. The walls creaked, the floors groaned under an invisible weight. It was as if the room was alive, breathing, pulsating, reacting to the key I had turned. "What's happening?" I gasped, my voice barely audible over the noise. But no one answered. My mind raced, the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I tried to make sense of what I had just set into motion. This wasn't just some deal. This was something much darker. And I was in the center of it. The tall man smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "You'll feel it soon enough." His eyes glimmered with an unsettling excitement. "This is just the beginning." I felt my stomach lurch as the room seemed to pulse around me, the floor beneath my feet shifting slightly. The humming grew louder, as if it was emanating from the very walls, the floor, the air itself. I couldn't understand it. None of it made sense. I turned to my husband, my heart pounding, my mind clouded with confusion and anger. He was still standing there, unmoving, watching me with those cold, detached eyes. It was like he wasn't even there. Not the man I had known. Not the man I had loved. "You've done it now," I whispered, my voice breaking. He didn't respond. He just stood there, watching as the room began to shift, as if the very space itself was stretching and warping in response to the key I had just turned. And then, it happened. The lights flickered, and for a brief, terrifying moment, everything went pitch black. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. What had I done? But then the lights returned, dim, flickering, casting long shadows across the room. The floor beneath me seemed to crack, a deep fissure forming in the ground. A low, rumbling sound echoed from below, and the air grew even colder, more oppressive. I backed away, but I couldn't escape. The walls seemed to close in, the room narrowing around me like a trap. I could feel it now, a strange pressure building in the pit of my stomach, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. "What is this?" I whispered. But no one answered. The tall man stepped forward, his smile widening as the chaos grew. "This," he said softly, his voice almost reverent, "is the start of something much greater than you can imagine. You've unlocked the door to power, to control, to everything." I looked around, my mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. The room seemed to be shifting, warping, as if the world itself was being remade around me. And in that moment, I realized what it was. This wasn't just some heist or betrayal. It was a ritual. A dark, ancient ritual that I had unwittingly become a part of. The key wasn't just a device. It was the trigger. A trigger to open a gateway. A gateway to something far beyond anything I could understand. I looked at my husband one last time, hoping, desperately hoping, that he would show some sign of recognition. Some sign that this wasn't what he truly wanted. But his eyes were empty. He was already gone. The tall man stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You see, it's already begun. You can feel it, can't you?" I shook my head, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. No. I didn't know. I didn't know what this was. What it would do. "It doesn't matter now," he said softly. "You've chosen, whether you realized it or not." I backed away further, my mind whirling. How had it all come to this? How had I gotten caught in this nightmare? Suddenly, the floor beneath us cracked open with a loud, terrifying sound. A deep, cavernous blackness gaped at my feet. From the depths of the hole, I could feel something pulling at me, something ancient, something powerful, something alive. I gasped, stumbling back, but the tall man was already standing at the edge of the opening. He reached down, his hand outstretched. "You have to come with me," he said, his voice strangely soothing. "It's not too late to be a part of something greater. The power is yours. All of it. You only need to take the next step." I looked at the hole, the black, endless void below. Something inside me screamed to run, to flee, to break free. But I felt the pull. The dark force reaching out, calling me. "Don't do this," I begged, my voice hoarse. But he wasn't listening. He reached out further, his fingers curling as though to grab me. I was frozen. Frozen in fear. Frozen in the weight of everything that had happened. Frozen by the enormity of the choice in front of me. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let this be the end. I wouldn't let it. Without thinking, I lunged toward the hole, my hands reaching for anything that could give me a chance. I grabbed a piece of broken floorboard, using it as leverage to pull myself back, away from the darkness. I had to escape. I had to. The tall man reached for me, but I was quicker. I yanked myself free, stumbling backward, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. I had broken free from the pull of the darkness. But then, the ground trembled again, and a low growl, like something ancient, something hungry, filled the air. The hole began to widen, and I knew that I hadn't escaped. I looked up at my husband one last time, my voice desperate. Please, help me. But his face remained empty, as if he wasn't even there. I was alone. Completely alone. The tall man turned toward the hole, a satisfied grin curling on his lips. It's too late, he said softly. You should have chosen when you had the chance. The ground rumbled beneath me, and before I could react, I felt a sharp tug. The darkness was pulling me in. My body lurched forward as the black void swallowed everything around me. And then, nothing. The darkness swallowed me whole. I was falling through nothingness, through a void so deep and endless that I lost all sense of time. My body was weightless, lost in the dark space where I couldn't tell up from down, or if I was even still alive. But then, there was a shift. A flicker. A sharp tug that pulled me back to reality. I gasped as I felt the ground beneath my feet again, solid and unforgiving. I stumbled, barely catching myself before crashing to the cold, hard floor. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the room anymore. I wasn't even in the house. I looked around, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The world around me was different. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the walls seemed to stretch far above me, covered in twisted symbols I didn't recognize. The floor beneath me was smooth, like glass, but it pulsed with an eerie, ominous glow. I was standing in what looked like some sort of vast, ancient temple, a place forgotten by time. What is this? I whispered to myself, panic rising in my chest. How had I gotten here? Had it been the key? Had I triggered something that I couldn't undo? Then, a voice echoed around me, low, deep, and filled with power. It wasn't just one voice. It was many. The voice of something ancient. Something powerful. Welcome. The word resonated in my mind, vibrating through every fiber of my being. I spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but there was nothing. Just the overwhelming silence of the temple. You've made your choice. The voice was everywhere, surrounding me, filling the space. It was in my mind now, pulling at my thoughts. I couldn't escape it. You. I started, but my voice faltered. Who are you? The air grew colder, and a dark shadow seemed to manifest in the center of the room. At first, it was just a dark shape, a shifting silhouette, but slowly, it began to solidify. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, cloaked in shadows, its face hidden. I could feel its presence, its power, seeping into my very soul. You have opened the door, the voice said. You have chosen the path of the initiated. Now, you must walk it to the end. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. This was not my choice, I whispered. I didn't choose this. The figure stepped forward, the ground shaking beneath its weight. You did, it said, its voice low and rumbling. You chose when you turned the key. You chose when you entered the game. I shook my head, fighting the wave of terror threatening to engulf me. No. I didn't know what I was doing. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it extended a hand toward me, its fingers long and cold, like death itself. Your choice has bound you to the path. There is no turning back now. I stumbled backward, tripping over the smooth, glowing floor, my mind spiraling into chaos. I had been so desperate to escape, to stop this madness, but now I was further down the rabbit hole than I could have ever imagined. Please. I begged, my voice breaking. Please, I don't want this. I never wanted any of this. The figure's eyes, glowing with a sickly light, narrowed as it took another step closer. You've already started. You will finish what you've begun. You are part of the ritual now. I looked around frantically, searching for any way out. There had to be some way to escape this nightmare. But the walls of the temple were closing in, the dark symbols on them glowing brighter, pulsing with an unnatural energy. I could feel the pull again, the same pull I had felt when I first turned the key. Something was calling to me, something inside this ancient place. "You are the final piece," the voice echoed. "The key to completing the awakening. The ritual must be finished, and you will be the one to finish it." The weight of the words settled on me like a boulder. The ritual. The power. This wasn't just about money, or power, or anything I had thought. This was something far darker. Something beyond anything I could control. I closed my eyes, my heart racing. What had I done? How had I gotten myself into this? And more importantly, how could I stop it before it was too late? I turned to the figure, my voice a quiet whisper. "What do you want from me?" The figure's lips curled into an eerie smile. "We want you to embrace the power you've unlocked." It gestured to the symbols on the walls, their glow intensifying. "This is your destiny. This is where you belong." I felt a surge of panic. No, this isn't me. I don't belong here. But the figure's eyes pierced into me, and I felt my thoughts begin to fade. I was losing control of myself, my body, my mind. I couldn't resist the pull any longer. I felt my arms move of their own accord, reaching for the strange symbols on the walls. "No!" I cried again, struggling against the force that was taking over me. But it was no use. "Yes," the figure said, its voice cold and commanding. "You will finish what was started. You will complete the ritual, and you will claim the power that is rightfully yours." I was almost there, my fingers brushing against the symbols, when suddenly I felt it. A jolt, a sharp, violent shock, that ripped through my body. I screamed. But the sound was drowned out by the booming voice that echoed through the temple. "No!" The room shook violently, and the dark figure faltered, its form flickering. The symbols on the walls flickered as well, the light fading and then bursting back to life. Something had changed. I could feel the power, the force that had been drawing me in, begin to collapse. It was as if the entire structure of this place was being torn apart, the energy unraveling around me. The figure recoiled, its form shuddering. "No!" it hissed, its voice filled with fury. "You cannot resist." But I was already moving. I didn't know how, but I was free. The pull was gone, and the energy in the room was beginning to wane. I reached out and grabbed the nearest object, a shard of stone from the wall, and hurled it into the dark figure's center. It screamed, its form dissipating into nothingness, the shadows unraveling. For a brief moment, everything was silent. Then the ground trembled again, and I felt the air shift. The temple began to collapse, the ceiling cracking and the walls crumbling. I ran, my legs barely carrying me through the debris. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. As the walls came crashing down around me, I felt the last vestiges of the darkness lift, and for the first time, I could breathe again. The light was blinding as I stepped into the unknown. And then, nothing. The light was blinding as I stepped into the unknown. I stumbled forward, my body aching, my mind still trying to comprehend what had just happened. The dark temple, the figures, the power that had almost consumed me, it was all fading away. The collapse had destroyed the world I had just been trapped in. And now I was free. But free didn't feel like freedom. It felt like an endless, empty void. A place where I was no longer sure of who I was, or what I had become. As the light began to dim, I found myself standing on the edge of a vast, open field, a place that seemed untouched by time, or the horrors I had just endured. The sky above me was painted with the soft colors of dawn, the sun rising slowly, casting a warm glow across the landscape. It felt like a dream, a place where nothing from the past could touch me. But it also felt unfamiliar. I was alive, but something had changed. I could feel it in my bones. I turned around, looking back toward the place I had just escaped. The crumbling ruins of the temple were gone, replaced by an empty horizon. The pull of the darkness was gone, its weight lifting from my shoulders like an old burden finally set down. But I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. What had I sacrificed to get here? I sank to my knees in the grass, the cool blades brushing against my skin. My hands trembled as I reached for the ground, trying to anchor myself in the real world. But no matter how hard I tried to hold on, I felt as if I were slipping through the cracks of reality. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distance, a shadow against the rising sun. At first, I thought it was another illusion, something conjured by the dark forces I had just escaped. But as the figure drew closer, I recognized the familiar silhouette. It was him. My husband. He was walking toward me, his face soft with something I hadn't seen in him for so long: regret. Guilt. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what to feel. The last time I had seen him, he had been nothing more than a stranger, a man caught up in something much bigger than both of us. A man who had turned his back on me without a second thought. But now, as he reached me, I saw a change in him. His eyes were no longer cold and distant. There was something raw, vulnerable, something real. I never meant for any of this to happen, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I was lost, caught in a web of lies and power. I thought I could protect you by keeping you away from it, but in the end, I dragged you deeper. I'm so sorry. I stared at him, the weight of everything he had done sinking in. The man I had married, the man I had loved, had been consumed by something I couldn't understand. But now, standing in front of me, he seemed human again. I don't know if I can forgive you, I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. But as I spoke, I realized that I didn't need to forgive him. What mattered now was the truth that we were both survivors. And perhaps, in time, that would be enough. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, his voice breaking. But I'm here now. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I looked away, the rising sun casting long shadows across the field. There was no going back. The choices we had made, the lives we had lived, had all led us here, to this moment. And in this moment, I understood. I didn't need to find closure in anyone else. I needed to find it in myself. Maybe we both need to heal, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Maybe that's the only thing left to do. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood there, waiting for me to find my own path. And in that silence, something shifted. I wasn't trapped in the past anymore. The chains that had bound me, that had bound us both, were broken. I took a deep breath, looking up at the endless sky above me. The world felt bigger now, wider, full of possibilities I had never imagined. The past had left its scars on me, but those scars didn't define me. I was no longer just a victim of the choices made by others. I was free to choose my own future. I turned back to my husband, the man who had once been my world, and I met his eyes. There was no going back to what we had. But there was a chance, a small chance, that we could move forward. Not together, but as individuals. Learning from the past, but not living in it. I don't know what happens now, I said softly. But I'm going to figure it out. For myself. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The world was wide open in front of me. I had the freedom to choose. As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light across the field, I took a step forward, away from the ruins of the past, and into the unknown future. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. I didn't know where the road would lead, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.